Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Welcome to the video lecture for chapter number 1. Chapter number 1 is the chapter that we cover in our first week. So this video is going to correspond to our first two lessons, lesson number 1 and 2. So in this chapter, the author is basically giving us the overview of everything that we would learn in this book. Just the basic introduction, and on the other hand the author is also giving us the basic understanding of the nomenclature of robotics, different terms, different terminologies used in robotics. All of those terminologies we would learn in this chapter. Okay, so we would start off by looking at the history of robotics, and then we would look at the definition. Then how do we classify robots, what are the different types of robots, what are the applications of robots, and what are the things that make up of a robot, so that is the components of a robot. And then we would be looking at the mechanisms, and we will look at some of the examples of real robots, and we'll try to solve them. We'll try to figure out how they would work, what can we do with them, all of those things. Okay, so first of all, the history of robots. Robots, any machine we can call as a robot, but by a modern robot we mean something a machine in which we are able to control some sort of position, okay, of that object. For example, if we have an arm, and if we are able to precisely control the position of an arm, that would be called a robot arm. Okay, so here we are going to stick with this model. So the basic breakthrough came in the 1940s when we were able to develop servo electric machines. Okay, but what do we mean by a servo motor or a servo machine? In anything where we can control the position of the motor very, very precisely, that is what we call a servo motor. Okay, and after that robotic field has been, so it's one of the important things to understand is that robotics involves development in many different fields. For example, we need better motors, we need better drives, we need better control, we need better sensors. So all of those were developed over, you can say, the last half century, and we have come to the stage where we are right now, that very advanced robots we can see doing very amazing things. Okay, so this is I wouldn't go through the details of all the history. You can just read it. It's pretty self-explanatory in that sense. Okay, so I would skip to this part. So this is where our robotics is to date. So most of you might have already heard this name, Boston Dynamics. It is a Boston, America based company which deals with humanoid robots. Okay, and they are considered to be on the they really are at the cutting edge of these technologies. Even this video which I have shared is a bit old. Their newer robots are even more capable than this one. Okay, so let's see what this robot can do. So this robot can do a pretty gymnastic in the sense. So let's just slow it down, and let me make a few points here. Okay, so let's slow it down. So we see how complicated this thing really is. Just for the robot to get down on the knees, this joint has to go this way. So this joint has to go this way, this joint has to go just to for anything as simple as sitting on the toes. It is very complicated if we think of all the motion that is involved in it, and to make sure that it stays balanced on its 2 feet, it uses its other 2 hands, just as we do. So motion, it is very easy to think that walking is very easy. Alhamdulillah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made it such that it is very easy for us. But on the other hand, to make a robot walk on 2 feet, it's not that easy. So all the motions and all the input that is required just to walk is something that maybe 2-legged robots are not more than 30 years old. Okay, proper 2-legged robots which could walk on 2 legs, and something like this, all the moves that this robot is doing are moves that we do every day, but this is still considered cutting edge in that respect. Okay, so you understand the complexity of the problem here, that how complex this system gets. Okay, so this is sort of where we are with this technology right now. Okay, so the definition of robot, this is the definition of a robot that we would stick to. This is the Robot Institute of America. A robot is a reprogrammable multifunctional manipulator designed to move materials, parts or tools, specialized devices through variable program motions for performance of a variety of tasks. Okay, so first of all, we want our robot to be reprogrammable. So it should not be designed in a way that it can only do one task. We should be able to change its task. Then multifunctional, this is very obvious. And by manipulator we mean any actuator, like anything which produces some motion. Okay, it can be used to move materials, parts or tools, and we should be able to program its motions. We should be able to control how the robot moves. Okay, another definition is a goal-oriented machine that can sense, plan and act. So here a robot should have these 3 things. It should be able to sense, it should be able to plan, and it should be able to act. All of these things are important. This sensation means input. This planning means control, making decisions, and action means the output. So a robot should have some inputs. It should be able to get some information from its environment. It should be able to plan according to that input, and then it should be able to act according to that information. And a humanoid robot is a robot which looks like a human. So this robot right here, this is what we call a humanoid robot. It has its actions mimic that of humans. Okay, so this is what we call by a humanoid robot. Okay, so there are some classifications regarding to robots. Okay, what do we mean by classification? So in terms of complexity, so Japanese Industrial Robot Association has made these 5 classifications for robots. We have very simple robots, a manual handling device, even that we are going to call as a robot. Then comes the fixed sequence robot. Fixed sequence robot is anything where the sequence is fixed. You cannot change the sequence. Variable sequence robot, and this is the part where our previous definition comes into play. So like I told you, the Robotic Institute of America only considers these 6 types of robots to be actual robots. Okay, where the sequence should be variable. By playback robot we mean anything once an action is performed, it is able to redo the same action over and over again. And numerical control, a robot is where we give instructions to a robot through numbers. For example, we tell the robot as x00, y01, z01. This is a position in space, and then the robot tries to move, robot hand or whatever tries to move in that direction. And the last classification 6 is the intelligent robot, where the robot is able to calculate by itself what type of motion it has to make to achieve something. Okay, so this is our goal, this is what we want to achieve, but this isn't as simple as it looks. Okay, so and all of these are very commonly used in industry, and the reason why even variable sequence robots are still in use is because of the cost. Okay, anytime you make your robot more intelligent, the cost of that robot goes up. Okay, so this is not the only classification of robots that is used in the world. There are other robot associations. For example, the French Robotic Association, AFR, has this classification for robots. Okay, so it has some differences. For example, it classifies all the automatic handling devices with predetermined cycles as 1, and then so this is according to type A is same as class 1, which we learned in the previous slide. Type B is equal to class 2, type C is equal to class 3 and 4, and type D is equal to class 5 and 6. Okay, so this is another classification of robots. So now we want to discuss different components of the robot. So now we want to get our hands dirty and look at the details. What is a robot made of? So first of all, we have to learn the nomenclature used in robotics. So we would be looking at primarily at robot arms, because this is a very vast field in robotics. And so in terms of robot arms, we have a robot is made out of joints and links. Okay, a joint is any actuator, any point in the robot which can move, and a link is just the connection between the two joints. Okay, so for example, this is link 0. Link 0 is the link that connects the base of the robot with joint 1, and then link 1 is the link between joint 1 and joint 2, and then link 2 is the link between joint 2 and end of arm. Okay, so you can see that these two, any robotic arm that you can think of would be basically made out of these two things. Either it would have joints and links. Okay, a joint is the part which can move, and a link is the part which is just stationary. So if we were to look in detail, so if this robot was to move, let's see, so if it were to move from this point, so this would move. Okay, sorry, I want to use this would move in this direction, so this link would now go in this direction, and this joint would now come here, and we would have something like this. Okay, so this robot can move, it can rotate either clockwise or anti-clockwise, and it can also rotate from here. Okay, so this robot is made out of 2 joints and 3 links. Okay, so this is just to be on the same page. Anytime I use the word joint, I mean the moving part of the robot, and anytime I talk about link, it is the connection between 2 joints. Okay, I hope we are all on the same page. It's pretty straightforward. Okay, so let's move on. What are the different types of joints? We can have a revolute joint. A revolute joint is a joint which can rotate about an axis. Okay. So what is a good example of a revolute joint? Our body is full of revolute joints. Okay. So this is a revolute joint. Okay. I can move my arm forward, I can move it backward. This is one revolute joint. This has two revolute joints. It can move like this and it can also move like this. Okay. So I have rotation is allowed in two axes. So these are two revolute joints. This is one revolute joint, and this again is two revolute joints. So I can move my hand like this and I can also move my hand like this. So these are another two revolute joints. Okay. So the other type of joints are prismatic joints. Okay. These are not very common in human beings or animals, but they are still very common in robots. A prismatic joint is the one which can allow linear motion. Okay. You might have already seen this. This is the actuator used in automatic door opening, the door openers. Okay. Right now you might have already heard home automation is very hot right now, and if you want an automatic door, if you want that the door opens and closes on itself, then you can use this actuator to do the job. Okay. So what would this actuator do? Essentially it allows motion in this direction. Okay. So this thing can move in forward or backward. Okay. So this is called a prismatic joint. Okay. Again, there are many different prismatic joints available, and there are many types of revolute joint also available, as we will see in this course, inshallah. Okay. So let's move on. Okay. So whenever we draw a robot as symbols, we want to represent a robot into appropriate symbols. Okay. So a symbol of a revolute joint is something like this. So you draw a circle with a dot in the middle, and then you draw two lines. These lines represent the lengths, and this represents the joint. Okay. And in 3D we want to represent the axis of motion. Okay. So we draw a cylinder in the axis of motion, and then we draw this you can say brackets, and then we draw the length. Okay. This is 3D representation, this is two-dimensional representation. Okay. For a prismatic joint, we draw a two-dimensional prismatic joint like this. You can already see that this part of the joint, so let me just clarify for you, this part of the joint, everything from here, it can move in this direction or it can move in this direction. Okay. But for three dimensions we represent a prismatic joint something like this. So for three-dimensional we make a cube. So we make a cube, and then we make a plate. Again, this really means that this joint allows motion to and fro. It can either move in this direction or it can move in this direction. And this revolute joint, as it is already obvious, it can rotate in this direction or it can rotate. So the basic difference, of course, again is that revolute joints allow for revolution, whereas prismatic joints allow for linear motion. I think this point should be pretty clear to everybody. Okay, so the next important term that is very commonly used is what we call the degrees of freedom of a robot. Okay, roughly speaking, the number of joints in a manipulator is equal to the number of degrees of freedom. What do we mean by degrees of freedom? How many independent motions can the robot make? Okay, so every independent motion that the robot can make is a new degree of freedom. Okay, for example, a robot can let's look at this example. This is a pretty common form of an industrial robot. So first of all, it can spin on the base. Okay, so this is the first degree of motion. Then this joint allows rotation in this direction, that is the second degree of motion. This is the third degree of motion, fourth, fifth and sixth. Okay, so it allows 6 independent motions. Okay, every manipulator or every joint amounts to a degree of freedom. Okay, and this as you can see, this robot has 6 degrees of freedom, and 6 degree freedom robots are very common robots. Okay, and we will see why. Because we need 3 degrees of freedom to achieve any position. Okay, so let's look at an example. Let's see, we have a robot in 3-dimensional space, and we want this robot to be able to achieve any point in this 3-dimensional space, that the end effector can move here or here or here or here, wherever in 3-dimensional. We can see that we need a robot to have at least 3 degrees of freedom to achieve that. Okay, if a robot only has 2 degrees of freedom, its motion would be restricted in a plane. It cannot move in a 3-dimensional space unless it has 3 degrees of freedom. Okay, so we need 3 degrees of freedom to achieve position. Then we need other 3 degrees of freedom to achieve orientation. What do we mean by orientation? Robots are used, so let's assume that this robot is used for painting. Okay, so this, at the end of this robot we have a paint gun. We have a gun at the end of the robot, and which is shooting paint. Okay, so whenever I want to paint something, not do I only need that this end effector be at one position, but I also want the gun to point in a particular direction. I don't want this gun to be pointing in this direction or in this direction or in this direction. So I need my robot arm to be in a position, but I also need my robot arm to be pointing in a particular direction. So that is why we need these other 3 degrees of freedom to achieve orientation. So I have a very informative video which I found on the internet. Let's see. This video explains very clearly what degrees of freedom are, and what does 6 degrees of freedom mean. This is made by an industrial company which produces robots. Okay, so you guys can go ahead and watch this video. I won't add the video part of it as part of my video, but when you are looking at these slides, you should definitely watch this video. It's very informative. Okay, so the next concept is that of redundant robots, redundant manipulators. Okay, so let's assume this robot shape where we have, this is the first axis, this is the first degree of freedom, this is the second degree of freedom, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh. So it has too many degrees of freedom. Anytime we have more degrees of freedom than 6, that robot is called redundant manipulator. What do we mean by redundant? We have more actuators than we really need. Okay, then the question arises, why would we make something which is redundant? So the answer to that question is that sometimes we want to avoid obstacles. So a very good example of a redundant robot arm is our arm. Okay, so my arm is a redundant robot because it has more degrees of freedom than are required. Okay, so first of all, I can move this like this, I can also move it like this. So these are 2 degrees of freedom. This is the 3rd degree of freedom. This is the 4th degree of freedom. This is the 5th and 6th, and then you also have other degrees of freedom in my hands. Okay, so I have these. So my arm is a redundant. You can say a redundant manipulator. But how does this redundant manipulation help me? So the answer to that question is very simple. So let's assume that I want to pick up this pen. Okay, I can pick up this pen like this, but if there is some obstacle between myself and the pen, I can also pick up this pen like this. Why? Because I have redundant manipulators. If I have a robot which only has 6 degrees of freedom, that robot can achieve any position and it can also achieve any orientation, but the robot cannot choose its position or its shape when a position is achieved. But whenever we have redundant robots, we can avoid obstacles, go around things, go on the other side. So that is why we would see that most of the modern robots used in industry are actually redundant manipulators, because in the industrial use the robots need to avoid a lot of obstacles to do their jobs. Okay, I hope this point is pretty clear. Okay, so the next thing that we want to talk about is the workspace of a manipulator. And when we say workspace, we are talking about 2 workspaces. One is the reachable workspace, and by reachable workspace we mean all the points that can be reached by the end point of the robot. Okay, and the second is the dexterous workspace, and that means all the points that can be reached with arbitrary orientation. What do I mean by arbitrary orientation? So for example, if I again give the example of my arm, every place that I can move my arm, this is my reachable workspace. But for example, this end, if I stretch my arm all the way up, now this point in the space is not a dexterous workspace. Why is it not a dexterous workspace? Because I can only point my finger upwards while I reach this point. So you can already see that reachable workspace, dexterous workspace is always a subset of reachable workspace. Reachable workspace is always greater, and dexterous workspace is always less than the total reachable workspace. Okay, I will also discuss many examples for regarding these. Okay, so this is a very good example. So this is a type of a robot called a SCARA robot, and so this has 3 manipulators. Okay, so it has 3 joints. So this is the first joint. So it can spin on, it can rotate here, it can rotate here, and then it has 1 prismatic joint. Okay, so it has 2 revolute joints and it has 1 prismatic joint. So all the places that this end effector can move to, all of them are called all the points, the set of all those points is called the workspace. So you can already see the first thing, this actuator can move up and down. So this actuator can move up and down. The second thing is then this can rotate. So this thing can rotate, and then this can rotate. So the whole thing can rotate like this. Okay, so all of this is the workspace. Okay, and as you can already see, my drawing is pretty terrible, but thankfully we already have. So this is the workspace as I was trying to draw with little luck. So this is the workspace of this robot. Okay, so let's move on. So this is another video that explains very neatly the workspace of a 2-dimensional robot. and I hope you guys watch this video and understand everything. It's pretty self-explanatory, so I would skip this video for now. Okay, so now we would look at some common kinematic configurations used in robots. Okay, so we would go through them pretty quickly for now, but during the regular Q&A session we would try to look at more examples of these robots. Okay, so this is what we call an articulated robot. Okay, so the robot has we write it as RRR. What does that mean? That means that this has 3 revolute joints. Okay, first one is this, the second one is this, and the third one is this. Okay, so it can rotate. Let me try to represent that. So it can rotate like this. Secondly, this arm can move up and down, and again this arm can move up, and this arm can rotate actually like this. Okay, and it actually can also move up and down. Okay, so this robot is actually 6 axis, but the first 3 axis is what we call RRR, that it has 3 revolute joints. Okay, I hope this point is very clear. And there are many robots in the industry which are used, which are based off this RRR configuration, and this configuration is called the articulated configuration. Okay, and this particular model, Motoman SK16, is actually one very old model and still very commonly used in the industry. Actually, we have one of it. It's not operational right now, but we have the structure at least of a Motoman SK16 robotic arm. Okay, so let's move on. So the next, as I already told you, so first, how do we draw the symbolic representation of this robot? So first of all, we need to understand that this is an RRR, so it would have 3 rotational joints. So the first joint is the body. So the body allows rotation along this axis, so we draw a cylinder. The second, the cylinder is drawn in this axis because it allows rotation in this axis, and the third again in the same axis. Okay, so this is an RRR, and so now we want to look at the reachable workspace of this robot. Okay, in 3-dimensional, if we look at it from top, it can so it can cover all of this semicircular area from the top, and if we look at it from the side, it can cover all of this area. Okay, so you can already see that it has a pretty wide reachable workspace. Okay, and where are these used in the industry? Most of the welding and assembling robots in the industry are actually articulated robots. Okay, and most of the painting robots are also articulated robots. Okay, you can safely say that articulated robots are the most common robots used in the industry. No other robot has that many uses in the industry as the articulated robots. Okay, so what are some of the advantages of using articulated robots? It has a lot of dexterity. What do we mean by dexterity? That it allows, because it's a 6 degrees of freedom robot, it allows a lot of motions. Okay, so the dexterity is pretty high. Secondly, it uses all of motors. So a motor provides, so it has, because it only has revolute joints, it does not have any prismatic joint. That means that the robot, all the joints are sealed. Okay, one of the reasons that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created only revolute joints in our body is because revolute joints can be sealed, and prismatic joint, it is hard to seal a prismatic joint. Okay, so any robot which extends its in length, that robot cannot be sealed very properly, because one of the rods has to come out of the other. Okay, so and in industrial applications, that causes problems. So dirt and other things can enter inside the robot, and the robot can get jammed. So this is one of the other pros of advantages of using articulated robots. So the next thing is that these robots are very flexible, so we can change the orientation, we can change the working of this robot very easily. Making this robot to do any other job is very easy. So what are some of the disadvantages of using this robot? First of all, this robot is expensive, and it is difficult to visualize and program. Okay, what do I mean by that? So for example, I want this articulated robot, this arm to be up here, pointing up here. So it's very easy to visualize the angles that we need to give on all of these servo motors, so that this end effector reaches this point. Okay, so it's not very easy in that sense, and it has a low accuracy. What do we mean by low accuracy? That because we are dealing with angles, and the position when we are calculating with angles, so we have to round off at different points. Okay, so even if I change the angle of this joint by a really small amount, the end effector would move a lot. Okay, because of revolute joint, it has relatively low accuracy. So these are some of the advantages and disadvantages of using articulated robots. Okay, so the next other common type of robot is called a spherical configuration. A spherical configuration has two revolute joints and one prismatic joint. So it is an RRP. So this robot is an example of this. It can rotate. So let me just draw it for you. So it can rotate in this direction, number one. Then it can rotate in this direction, and then this third joint is prismatic, which means it can move up and down. So this completes the robot part. This is again the wrist of the robot, the other 3 degrees of freedom which allow for orientation control. Okay, this is again a common type of a robot. Most of the spherical configuration robots are actually pneumatic robots. Some of them they work on air. So why do we call it a spherical configuration? You can already see that this relates to spherical coordinates. Okay, I would like to remind you guys that we studied this in last. So what do we mean by spherical coordinates? That we have an R and an angle theta and an angle phi. So this is an X, Y and Z. So this is called the spherical coordinates, and you can already see that this right here is like the angle theta, this right here is like the angle phi, and the length of this thing is like the radius. Okay, so that is why it is called spherical configuration. And it's not very hard to see that because this is spherical coordination, spherical configuration, the robot workspace would look like something like a sphere from the outside. So it is a part of a sphere, the whole workspace. Okay, so I hope this is clear. So this concludes the part 1 for our lesson, chapter number 1. So this would be like lesson number 1, and then we will cover the rest of this chapter in lesson number 2. Thank you very much for listening to me.